Hello, welcome to IBCC channel. In this video, we will talk about OSPF default information originate. Default information originate, in other words, is default routes originate. How it works? Take a look at the above diagram. This is the OSPF domain. In this OSPF domain consists three routers. R1 connect to outside the world in order to let R2 and R3 able to send traffic to the outside world via R1. So R1 has to be selected, and in the R1 configure default information originate. Then R1 will generate a default information LSA and propagate this default information LSA to the rest of the OSPF device in the OSPF domain. In turn, rest the device like R2 and R3 will have the default routes which pointing to R1. So R2 and R3 able to send the traffic to the outside world via R1. Below is the command itself. This is a physical device. So command is under the router OSPF process ID. Command is default information originate. So you can just use this command alone. So as long as the router, for instance, for this case, it's router 1. As long as there is a default non-OSPF routes reside in router 1, this command, default information originate, will generate a default information for rest of the OSPF router in the OSPF domain. This command also have a couple options you can choose. First option is always. Always means generate the default information unconditioning. Next is matrix. So you use matrix option, you can change the default information matrix values. Third one is a metric type. So OSPF have two metric type, E1 and E2. You can change the metric type from E1 and E2. Remember, E1 metric type is better than E2 metric type. So last one is route map. Route map, you can use route map to change the default information parameters. For instance, you can change the default information tags. So okay, let's see how to configure it. This network is an OSPF network. GW01 and GW2 are gateway which connect to the ISP separately. There's ISP01 and ISP02. The BGP between the ISP to the gateway already configured. The BGP between the GW01 and GW2 is deliberately not configured for the demonstration reason. So in this network, the OSPF device R1, R2, MSO1, MSO2 don't have a default routes. So the goal in this video is to configure the default information originate from the GW1 and GW2 to generate the default information for the rest of the OSPF device in this OSPF domain. So currently, since no default information in the device like R1, R2, MSO1, MSO2, so all the PC connects on that will cannot go to the internet. Let's take a look. Okay, log into the PC01. Let's pin 8.8.8.8. That is a public DNS. Pin is unreachable. Destination host unreachable. So that's PC1 cannot go to internet. Log into the MSO2. Take a look at the routing table. Show IP routes. So routing table in the MSO2 do not have a default routes. Okay, now we log in to the GW1 and the GW2 to verify. GW1 first. Show IP routes. Yeah, in the GW1 there is a BGP default routes, which is good. Okay, let's go to the GW2. Show IP routes. There is a BGP default routes in GW2 also. Perfect. So we choose GW1 and GW2 to generate the default information for the OSPF domain. Let's do it now. Okay, in the GW01, okay, take a look at OSPF config. Okay, in the router OSPF, configure the default information originate. Question mark, you can see there are a couple options. We use this command alone. Okay, as long as we already checked, there is a non-BGP default routes in the GW01, so this command alone will generate a default information for the OSPF domain. Go to the GW02, do the same thing, show run SRO, check OSPF. In the OSPF, do the default information originate. So, okay, at this moment, MSO2 here should have the default routes. Take a look, show IP routes. Yeah, you can clearly see the default OSPF routes. O means OSPF, E2 means external type 2. OSPF default routes here. You can see there's two OSPF default routes with equal costs. So that's exactly like our design. We send the default routes from two places. One's GW1, another side is GW2. So in the MSO2, they get two routes. Since the path from GW1 to the MSO2 and from the GW2 to the MSO2 is equal cost path. So since we mentioned this default information is a default LSA, so we can check the LSA from the OSPF database. Since it's external LSA, so we tap the external, just tap the default prefix, check. See, there's two default LSA here. One this, another this. Check the advertising router. This is a 10.255.255.11, which is GW01. Since the loopback interface is 10.255.255.11. For another one, advertising router is 10.255.255.12. That is a GW02. See the loopback address. Okay, so back to the PC1 to verify. pin the same IP 8.8.8. Oh, successfully. That's very good. Okay. So next, I want to show you something here. Okay. Currently, you see show IP route. See a BGP default routes within in the GW1. What happens if I remove this BGP default routes by shutting down this interface? What happened? Let's do it. Conf interface G0 shut. So if I shut the interface G0/0, the BGP will down. So see the BGP will down, and I will lose the BGP routes. Show IP routes. See the BGP routes is gone. However, instead, I get the OSPF default routes, which is come from the GW02. You can see show IP BGP SU. Okay, so the BGP stays idle. So a BGP routes down. I don't have BGP. Right now, I get OSPF default routes from, since we config this default originate in the GW02. So GW01 gets. However, you can see here, show run SRO. In the GW01, I configure default information originate. So does this take effect or not for the GW01? That means it's GW01 generate default information in current situation or not. The current situation is although there is a BGP, although there is default routes. However, this default routes is OSPF routes. There's no other non-OSPF default routes. So you take a look. To check this, you take a look. We go back to the MSO2. MSO2 is here. First, we can check the routing table, right? Show IP route. Oh, you noticed here routing for the routing table default routes in the MSO2 only have one compared before. Before they have two. Before have two. Here, before you see they have two default routes. One go to the 10.8, another go to 10.0.06 each side, right? Right now only have one. So that means GW01 currently, since they don't have a non-BGP default routes in his routing table, so if you just use the default information original command alone, it will not generate the default informations. Back to the MSO2. Another way you can check the OSPF database. You do the show IP OSPF database external, enter. You see there is only one LSA for the default information left here. Who generated this default information? You see the advertising route is 10.255.255.12. Right now, only GW02 generated the default information for rest of the OSPF domain. Okay, so right now, let's use the options. Okay, if we log into GW01 into the OSPF, default information originate question mark, you will see there are options. What happens if you use always here? If you put always, that means this GW01 will generate the default information unconditionally. So he will generate. However, this command is dangerous command. I will show you why. We hit this one. Okay, now you back to the MSO2. You check the routing table. show IP route. Okay, you see the OSPF routes, default routes, 2 default routes come up. Well, that's good, which is good because currently GW01 and GW02 both generate the default routes. Check the OSPF routing table, IP OSPF routing table external. You see the 2 routes, 2 SLA. One comes from GW01, another comes from GW02. However, I mentioned this command in the GW01 use the default information origin always is dangerous because in current situation. So if you check this, it generated the default informations. So the traffic will, since it generates the default information, the traffic will eventually go to the GW01. However, currently in the GW01, there is no default information pointing to somewhere, so the traffic will die to here. If you show the IP route in the GW01, you will notice there is no default routes. So currently, probably if the traffic hit to here, we'll have problem, right? You can if I go from this one, if I go from here, RS01 from R1, if we just check internet, right? If from here I pin 8.8.8 will be not pinnable, right? So it's U is unreachable, right? So that means he generates the default routes, but however, he don't have a default routes in his routing table. The traffic eventually go to him will be die. So, okay, here I also bring another interesting thing is for the command default information originate command, that command is benefit for the rest of the OSPF device in the domain and not benefit for himself. So you noticed here before we use the always command, they have a default OSPF routes learned from GW01. After we force him generate the default information, the default OSPF for itself is gone. Notice that. So even here, show IP OSPF database external, you see the GW2 also have 2 default RSA. However, since we have this command default information originate, so they will not use only of this RSA for himself. That is sense, just a notice. So okay, back to our config. Let's show the config again. Show us R. Let's remove this always sense. Go to the OSPF, to the no default information original always. Show again. So the always is removed. After always removed, let's put it back. Let's put back our BGP routes. Before put back, just show IP routes. You see the OSPF, as long as move the always the OSPF routes back, because this router currently didn't generate the default routes, so he can use the default routes come from other device. Default OSPF routes come from other OSPF device. So let's put my BGP back. interface C0/0, no shot. So no shot, the interface will BGP back. Back to show IP routes. So the BGP not back yet. Okay, I have to wait a little bit. Just show you something here. Oh, BGP come up. Show IP routes. Yeah, BGP routes come up instead of OSPF, since BGP the administration numbers better, right? So show the as oh yeah. Here I emphasize just use the default information originate alone without any option. Actually, it's the best and the safest way to do the OSPF default information originate. Please remember this. Okay, now let's from the lab perspective show you something about the metric and the metric type. Currently, back to the MSO2, you see the show IP route. You see the default routes, two default routes, equal cost, one from left side, one from right side. So currently, now you want all the traffic just go to the left side, go to the GW01. You make this side as a primary, other side as a backup. So how you do that? You can go to the GW02, make the default information metric with a large cost. So that's traffic will go to the GW01 always. So we can illustrate this, right? This is a GW02. We do the default information. Question mark, you see the metric. You put the metric here. You put the cost, like any cost, and put a 30. Okay, so hit the 30. Now you back to the MSO2 to check the routes. To check the routes, you see, show IP routes. Yeah, there's one OSPF default routes show up on the routing table of the MSO2. That is next hop to the 10.0.06.6 here. So that's exactly what we lack, right? To further check this, you can do the show IP OSPF database, and the external, and put the default prefix here. See the two RSA here. One from the GW01, another from the GW02, right? So you noticed the routes metric from GW02 becomes 30. So the metric from the GW01, matrix 1, which is default. So as a smaller matrix, it wins. So what happens if you change your mind? You say you want the traffic go to GW02, regardless what is the metric they are used currently. How you do that? So that's you can use another sense called the metric type. So the metric, you notice this SLA have the metric type options. Currently, by default, is metric type is 2. So if you change the metric type from metric 2 to metric 1, so metric type 1 is better than metric type 2. So metric type 1 will wins. So we can do that. Okay. So do the same thing here. Go to the GW02 default information metric 30. Then after this, do the metric type. Metric type question mark. There have 1 and 2. We choose a better one. 1 is better, and then choose 1. You go back to the MSO2 to check the routes. Show IP routes. Oh, you see, notice the routes. Next hop is changed to .8, 10.0.0.8.8 is here. Okay, that's path is what we just want to do. Okay, check the OSPF database. Okay, you notice that the second RSA, which comes from the GW2, the metric type become 1. The first RSA comes from the GW1, metric types 2. So metric type 1 is better than metric type 2. So this second RSA is win. Let's recap this. Use a default information originate without only following options is the safest way to originate the default routes for an OSPF domain. The default information originate command will generate default information that benefits other routers, not benefit itself. Carefully choose from which router to originate the OSPF default routes. Choose the wrong router may cause you problem. Since the E1 metric is better than E2 metric, do not change the default information originate metric type to E1 from the default metric type E2 if there is no specific reason. If you do so, it may cause you big troubles. Okay, I think we can end this video for now. If you think this video is helpful, please give thumb up. Thank you for watching.